Hey, and welcome to lesson 5.4. During this lesson, we're going to continue to extend our toolkit and look at some ways that we can help students represent learning, but also find ways to help them talk about what they have learned and also to improve that through some feedback. Just a reminder to make sure you access and look for all of the different materials in your learning journal, in your workbook, where you've got lots of information and further detail about each of these different strategies. Even though I might show only a little screenshot of some of the work, in your journal, you've got all of the details that you need to be able to use these in your classroom. So representing learning 5.4, this is the last of our tool set sections. And we begin with something that you know already. This is something that we have chatted about before in other parts of the course, and that's to do with sketchnoting. It's a great technique for you to maybe use within your classroom as you help your students represent what they have learned in different creative ways. And I'm reminding you again of some of the different ways that we might use it. We use lettering and bullets, frames, connectors, shadows, and different sketches of people as a way of building up a little representation of what they have learned. For example, in a simple way, you might do a shared reading together, or you might have an article that you're exploring about a topic. And then afterwards, giving the students some time to be able to create a sketch note that represents what they have learned from that reading, and taking that information and sharing it in a different way, representing what they have learned through a creative sketch note. Using sketchnoting is a really powerful technique to help students to represent learning in different ways. These are some other examples, and you'll remember seeing some of these before, and they can look, there's obviously great diversity in how we might use them. And a reminder that we're giving lots of choice here for our students to be able to represent their learning in different ways. We don't have a fixed way that we want them to be able to represent what they know. This is a nice way of opening up that student choice so that they represent what they've learned in the way that they want to do it. You might use a sketch note as a technique to support that. Another thing that we have to be able to get better at in our classroom with project-based learning is the dynamic of feedback. So how do we give and receive feedback? And the next two tools that we'll cover now to do with how we can do that, how we can organize feedback in our classroom. And we begin with a gallery walk. And a gallery walk is a simple way of gathering some collective feedback from maybe a larger group. You might do this with a whole class. It might be towards the end of a session where you've been creating something. It might even be at the end of a time where they've been making some sketch notes. And what you do is you ask every student to be ready to post up and create the gallery. So maybe they're doing that on their desktop. Maybe they're doing that on their tables. You could post up to wall spaces if you have some room as well. And you need to clear some space so that we can actually walk the gallery. You could do this in quiet ways or in discussion as well. And you're encouraging your students to see the work and the creative expression of others, and that's a great inspiration. But you're also doing it so that they can provide feedback to another student. They may well be encouraged to think about something that they see, or you might pose a question for them to look for as they're looking at the different pieces of work that have been shared. They might take a post-it note with them and write down a couple of pieces of feedback and tear that off and post it up on a piece of work and leave feedback for different pieces within the gallery. The gallery walk is just a short, maybe it's a 10-minute session towards the end of a time of where you've created something, and then you use a gallery walk to get everybody up on their feet, moving around, sharing feedback, but also seeing the creative work of others. The last tool that we're going to look at is an extension of some of the protocols that we've already shared. And you'll see on the slide here, kind, specific, and helpful. That's something that we've already talked about. And the rest of these are all to do with how we give feedback and the things that we have to remember when we're sharing feedback with others. We're going to be hard on the content, soft on people. So important idea that ensures that we're giving critique or feedback about the work that's being shared, not the people that are sharing it. We're the hard on the content. We ask questions about what we see, but we're not critiquing the people, we're critiquing the work. It's an important distinction if we're trying to improve feedback. We encourage people to step up and step back. There might be a time where you're encouraging people to talk as a group, and this is a great protocol to really encourage those quieter ones to step forwards, but also those who always take up the space to step back and allow other people the chance to do the same. And then finally, we have the Chinese character Ting for listening, and this reminds us to listen in lots of different ways. We listen with 10 eyes. We use eye contact and body language to show that we're listening. We listen with one heart. We listen with purpose. We know why we're listening. And we also wrap our ear around the king. This is the way of treating the speaker, the person who's sharing, like royalty, so that they have the best chance to be successful in their contribution. The Chinese character reminds us to be as present as we can when we're listening and providing feedback to others. So you would use these protocols as a reminder to students, as a reminder to each other about how we're going to work together, not just what you're doing, but what are we expecting of each other? How should we best approach this? And these are some ways that we can approach giving and receiving feedback, and we know that they make a big difference. Those are a few different tools to look at in terms of representing information for your toolkit. And in the next section, we're just going to wrap up this module and have a little activity for you to do as well.